Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Have you ever wondered why no one used the time turner to save Dumbledore? What if there was a way to prevent his death, but no one even tried? In today's video, you'll find out the real reason why the time turner couldn't bring Dumbledore back. When I first watched Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, one question kept nagging at me. Was there really no way to save Dumbledore? My friends and I left the theatre discussing every possible solution. And soon we had an idea. Why didn't Harry use the time turner? He had used it before. He knew how it worked, and Dumbledore meant so much to him. Wouldn't he at least try? But he didn't. Why? The time turner is a small hourglass on a chain that allows the user to travel back in time. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione used it to attend multiple classes at once. Professor McGonagall gave it to her as a special privilege. Later, she revealed its secret to Harry and Ron, and together they used it to save Buckbeak and Sirius Black. So why wasn't it even considered in The Half-Blood Prince when Snape killed Dumbledore? Harry was devastated. Dumbledore was more than just a headmaster to him. I couldn't stop thinking about this. After digging into the books and discussing with fellow fans, I found several possible answers. First, Dumbledore was already dying. He had destroyed one of Voldemort's Horcruxes and was cursed beyond healing. Maybe Harry understood that saving him would only delay the inevitable. Second, time travel in the wizarding world is dangerous. One of its biggest rules is that you can't interfere with your own past. Meeting yourself or changing major events could have catastrophic consequences. Perhaps Harry simply didn't know how to alter the timeline without making things worse. But even with these reasons, something still didn't add up. Then I found the real answer. In the Order of the Phoenix. During the battle at the Ministry of Magic, all the time turners in the Department of Mysteries were destroyed. That scene never made it into the movies, leaving many viewers unaware that time travel was no longer an option. So, in the end, it wasn't a plot hole. It was just a missing detail from the films. If Dumbledore had survived, everything in the wizarding world might have unfolded differently. Imagine a timeline where Harry didn't have to face the horrors of losing his greatest mentor. Would the hunt for Horcruxes have been the same? Would Voldemort have been defeated sooner, or would things have spiraled out of control in ways we can't predict? Dumbledore wasn't just another powerful wizard, he was the mastermind behind the entire plan to bring Voldemort down. His death left Harry, Ron, and Hermione with fragments of knowledge, but no clear path forward. Without Dumbledore's guidance, they stumbled through the search for Horcruxes, making mistakes, nearly dying multiple times, and only barely succeeding in the end. But if he had been there, the journey might have looked very different. The biggest question is whether he would have even wanted to be saved. Dumbledore was always a step ahead, always planning, always aware of things no one else could see. He had already accepted his fate. In fact, he orchestrated his own death. He knew Snape would have to kill him, not just to spare Draco from becoming a murderer, but to strengthen Snape's position within Voldemort's ranks. He wasn't just dying, he was ensuring that his death would serve a purpose. So if Harry had somehow managed to go back in time and warn Dumbledore, what would have happened? Would Dumbledore have listened? Would he have allowed himself to be saved, knowing it might unravel the plan he had so carefully put in place? It's hard to say. Dumbledore was brilliant, but he was also deeply flawed. He carried guilt over his past, over his sister's death, over the mistakes he had made in his youth. He saw death as a part of life, something not to be feared, but embraced when the time was right. He believed in fate. And that's where the time-turner argument starts to fall apart, because even if the device had been available, Dumbledore probably wouldn't have used it. But let's entertain the possibility for a moment. Let's say Harry ignored all of that and decided to take fate into his own hands. He sneaks into the Ministry of Magic, finds a hidden time turner that somehow survived the destruction, and goes back to the night Dumbledore died. He arrives at the Astronomy Tower just before Snape casts the fatal spell. He sees Draco standing there, wand shaking. He sees the Death Eaters surrounding them. He sees Dumbledore, weak, barely holding himself up, looking at Snape with an expression of absolute trust. Harry has one shot. He could stun Snape before he acts. He could hex Draco, drive away the Death Eaters, change everything in an instant. But then what? Dumbledore would still be dying. The curse from the Horcrux would still be spreading through his body. And if he lived, Snape's cover would be blown. Voldemort would know Snape had betrayed him. The entire war would shift, and not necessarily in Harry's favor. Dumbledore, if he saw Harry there, might have even stopped him. Might have told him, firmly but kindly, that he could not interfere. That things had to happen this way, that his death was necessary. And Harry, torn between love and duty, would have had to make a terrible choice, to obey the man he admired most, or to defy him and risk breaking the timeline. Even if Harry had saved him, Dumbledore's survival wouldn't have guaranteed victory. The Horcruxes still had to be destroyed. Voldemort was still gathering his forces. The war was still inevitable. And in some ways, Dumbledore's death was what pushed Harry to become the leader he needed to be. It forced him to take control, to make decisions, to stand on his own. If Dumbledore had lived, would Harry have grown into the person he became? Or would he have remained in the headmaster's shadow, waiting for instructions instead of forging his own path? Maybe that's why the time turner was never an option, because even if it could have changed the past, it might not have changed the future in the way we think. Maybe Dumbledore had to die so that Harry could truly live. Still, it's impossible not to wonder, what if Dumbledore had been there during the final battle at Hogwarts? Would he have been able to defeat Voldemort himself? Would he have stood beside Harry, shielding him, guiding him, making sure he never had to face the Dark Lord alone? Or maybe things would have gone horribly wrong. Maybe Voldemort would have seen Dumbledore as his greatest obstacle and targeted him first. Maybe Dumbledore's presence would have altered the flow of battle in unpredictable ways. Maybe, in the end, Harry still would have had to face Voldemort alone, because that was the only way it could ever end. The truth is, time travel in Harry Potter is a tricky thing. It isn't like in other stories where changing one event leads to a new timeline. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, we see that time is a loop. Everything that happened had already happened. When Harry and Hermione went back in time, they didn't change events, they completed them. If they hadn't interfered, Buckbeak would have been executed, Sirius would have been kissed by Dementors, and Harry would have never survived the lake. But because they always went back in time, those events never happened. So if Harry had tried to save Dumbledore, it's likely that something would have stopped him. Maybe he would have been caught before he could reach the Astronomy Tower. Maybe the time turner wouldn't have worked the way he expected. Maybe some unseen force, the same one that kept him from dying in the Forbidden Forest, would have ensured that events played out the way they were meant to. Or maybe Harry simply never considered it. Maybe in his heart he knew that some things weren't meant to be undone. And yet the idea lingers. The thought of a world where Dumbledore survived, where Harry had one last chance to learn from him, where the war might have played out differently. It's one of those unanswered questions that keeps fans awake at night, wondering about the possibilities. But in the end, we have to accept the story as it is. Dumbledore's death wasn't just a tragic moment, it was a turning point. It set everything else in motion. Without it, who knows what might have happened? Still, if you had a time turner and you could go back, would you try to save him? Or would you let history take its course?